I'm going to be talking, shifting a little bit, but talking about sort of giving you a summary of the ongoing education outreach activities, primarily going on at the EarthScope National Office, with a few shout outs to our many collaborators. And I first want to point out that we have a substantial and highly competent team, and I want to make sure that everybody on there is recognized because we all work together very well. And again, thanking also Greg Anderson because he's provided us some slides that we've used in a lot of these talks. And I'm going to start out by pointing out that we are definitely operating in a fairly substantial broader impacts collaboration. And we're basically, we consider this kind of a slice through a three-dimensional diagram. It doesn't really begin to show all the interrelationships that are there, but what it does show is the sort of major partners we work with. The two facilities, of course, work very closely with IRIS and UNAVCO, who have their own substantial education outreach programs. And again, we're closely affiliated. We're on each other's committees. We often collaborate on projects, as you know, with good EarthScope policy. We have a Education Outreach Steering Committee. That's what EEOSC represents, which has members from the broader EarthScope community, including scientists, educators, and ex officio members from the different facilities. We also interface with PI-led EarthScope projects. Okay, there's a lot of education outreach that's done programmatically by the facilities, by the national office, but people who get funding from NSF to do EarthScope research also have broader impacts criteria that they need to satisfy, and they do that through a number of education outreach projects, some of which you'll see in the poster sessions. If you haven't already, there's some really good ones showing. We also have an interface. The green circle down there represents other organizations that do education outreach in the earth sciences. They may not be directly affiliated with EarthScope, but thanks to funding that we got from NSF, we organized something in 2012 called a Provider Summit, which allowed us to interface with a number of these organizations, again, like SCEC and GeoPrisms, and organizations that have very active education outreach programs. And of course, I want to recognize NSF, which makes all of this possible with its funding. EarthScope, by design, EarthScope foregrounds education and outreach, and some people might think that's one of those verbified nouns, but actually it is a valid verb. I looked it up, but we do put education outreach in the foreground, and our office's vision basically has these three principles that we have inherited. We inherited a very robust education outreach program from the previous national office at Oregon State University, and I'll give a shout out to Bob Lilly, who was running the program before we were, and left us with a lot of very successful activities that we wanted to sustain. We also wanted to add value with new program initiatives, because certainly this field, not only is the science changing, but the entire field of education outreach is changing quite considerably too, and also as needed, upgrade and enhance. And you can see we were working in a number of venues, as I'm going to point out in a moment. We kind of focused on a few, but we have a presence in all of the venues that you can see down there on the list. I want to again bring up, John Tabor showed this morning, the education triangle, the education pyramid, and basically point out that, again, as John said, we find it most successful if we're able to do a few things well rather than try to spread ourselves too thinly. And given that there is a large education outreach community out there affiliated with EarthScope, the national office has chosen to occupy niches that we think are most productive. And so we're focused more on the right side of the triangle, the free choice, informal learning side. We're working primarily with people who present science in informal settings like national parks, state parks, and museums. So interpreters. Interpretation is the teaching method which is essentially indigenous to these informal settings, while still providing logistical support to people who are on the left side of the triangle there, the people who are working in the formal settings, K-12 education, undergraduate education, and graduate education. And again, this progress is we start with basic scientific knowledge at the top, and it becomes disseminated, so it becomes essentially public or common and useful knowledge. And I know Bob likes to also turn the triangle around and indicate that essentially we are telling a story up to our stakeholders. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the things we're doing. One of our most important programs are the interpretive workshops. And again, this is working with people who are in the field of interpretation. Again, Oregon State established these, and we've continued that series. In these workshops, which are held approximately once every 6 months or so, we site in a location that's essentially tracking the progress of USArray across the country. We bring together interpretive professionals such as rangers and museum curators and docents, with active EarthScope scientists to share information with each other. And the key point of these workshops is everybody stays together for the entire time. So the scientists impart the latest findings on EarthScope. The interpretive professionals share their expertise on how to bring that information to the broadest possible audience. We have conducted a number of evaluations. Bob had an early set, and we now have Patrick Schwab, a member of our team, that's conducting a number of formative and summative, in other words, in progress and final evaluations. And the data we're getting is that these are very highly effective. We do get feedback from previous participants that talk about how they're using these ideas. And again, I want to mention that when we do these workshops, the EarthScope professionals that we bring also include education and outreach people from IRIS, UNAVCO, and some of our other partner organizations that come together. We've had 2 workshops in the last year. We had one that was hosted by James Madison University in Harrisonburg in the Central Appalachians, and that came fairly close on the heels of the Mineral Virginia earthquake by design, so we had a lot of interest in that. More recently, Steve Jaume and his colleagues at College of Charleston hosted one for us at Southeast United States. The 8th of these workshops in the series are going to be held this September up in Acadia National Park. So again, we've essentially moved to the east along with USArray and PBO. Another thing that we're really proud of and we're trying to promote is this idea of EarthScope education and outreach in support of place-based geoscience teaching, meaning teaching that is situated in local environments and local settings. Now, in order to be able to teach geoscience that way, if you want to teach plate tectonics using local examples, then you need data. And we find that EarthScope is obviously going to be a great source for this. As findings come out from EarthScope research, we're learning more and more about fine detail of crust and mantle structure, not just in the really tectonically active places that everybody always talks about in intro geology textbooks, but in all parts of North America. And I want to draw attention to a poster by Carol Engelman, which is down in the poster session. I don't know how many people have seen that one yet, but I encourage you to go look at it because that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. They're talking about using data from the SPREE project, the Mid-Continent Rift, to use the Mid-Continent Rift as an example of teaching plate tectonics in the mid-continent setting. So in other words, we would like to encourage EarthScope researchers, as findings come out, to present their information, their data, their findings in such a way that they can bring local geophysics, geochemistry, structure, tectonics, geologic history to educators who are teaching earth sciences at all grade levels, as well as informal educators in those regions. We ourselves don't do a whole lot of teacher professional development, but we do provide support for it. Again, this is an area where people like, for example, Skip Nelson and people working with existing EarthScope programs have set up a number of very successful teacher professional development workshops, and the national office is available to provide support either in the form of personnel coming to attend the workshops, but also to send materials. We do also partner with American Geosciences Institute and with NASA, who offer a series of teacher professional development workshops, and we're present at some of those. This is actually one that we did hold at ASU. It was funded by AGI and NASA, but EarthScope was present to share information. Community outreach. We have a regular and highly visible presence at pretty much all the major national geoscience and science education conferences. Hopefully, if you're going to these meetings, you come by and see the EarthScope booth. You can see this is a list of some of the organizations. You may not be familiar with NSTA, that's National Science Teachers Association. Sarah Robinson, our E&O manager, was just there. SOCNAS is the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. I think John mentioned that earlier today. And AERA is the American Educational Research Association. So we are present at a considerable number of these professional meetings. And again, also mentioning that in spring 2012, we ourselves had a provider summit where 11 different earth science organizations doing education and outreach came and participated and basically interacted. And several representatives from these provider summit organizations are here at this meeting. We brought them here so we can continue to network with these organizations. We have short courses and workshops. Some of this stuff was already pointed out. The annual speaker series, this is all of the recent ones and a couple from the previous years. And if you're sitting in here between talks, you'll see sooner or later all the recent speakers' biographies and talks will be flashed up on the screen. We're really grateful to the speakers who provide tremendous outreach to the professional as well as to the communities. with their expertise, and they do that pretty much on their own time, and we're very grateful for them. We produce the newsletter Insights. Again, John also pointed that out, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Public outreach. We are both nationally active and locally active. We're based in the Southwest, and so we do outreach when the events occur in the Southwest, but we're also present in other parts of the country. As I'm going to show you, we've been active in major science outreach activities in Washington, D.C. and other places. It was already pointed out that EarthScope is EPIC, that Popular Science rated EarthScope the #1 EPIC research program in the universe, right? The other thing I really want to point out is that thanks largely to the efforts of our own Wendy Bohan and people working with her, that EarthScope, the national office, has become a recognized leader in the use of social media for education outreach. We are present on all the major social media outlets, as well as some of the smaller ones that you haven't heard of. If you're using any of these, if you recognize these icons down here, you're using them. EarthScope is there, and we encourage you, if you haven't already, to like us and hook up with us and stay in touch through that way. We're very proud to point out that we just rolled out a new website design in collaboration with the NAVCO. And so this is what earthscope.org's front page looks like now. We're very, very proud of that. Present at the US Science and Engineering Festival, there's Steve Whitmire from our Education Outreach Steering Committee there interacting with kids, and also you could see we have our good friends from IRIS that were present. This happens every 2 years. This is a major event on the National Mall and around there. It's essentially what President Obama has referred to as the nation's science fair. And EarthScope is present there along with IRIS and UNAVCO and other organizations, and we will be going back in 2014 for sure. We're active in the Great Shakeout, the program that's trying to inculcate earthquake safety awareness across the country. This year in Arizona, we had a public forum on earthquakes in Arizona. We've also disseminated a lot of shakeout materials through our own social media outlets, and again, we'll be active participants in that for the future. That's what we're doing now. In the few minutes I have remaining, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we have planned, and then I'd also like to sort of issue a challenge to everybody to work with us and think about what you'd like to do and like to see in education outreach. As USArray moves into the eastern United States, and PBO already has stations there, the EarthScope National Office is there with our partners to work on education outreach already. As I said, we've had 2 interpretive workshops. We had the Central Appalachians workshop in 2012 and the Southeast Interpretive Workshop in early 2013. The Northeast workshop in Maine will be coming next fall, and again, the Science and Engineering Fair we're participating. So we've tried to have a very active presence in the eastern United States, and we'd like to continue that. Also like to point out that, again, I was there at the right side of the continent breakout session today, very excited to hear all the science that was talked about, and I want to just remind all of you who are talking about that when the time comes to think about the broader impacts of your work, let us know how we can help. EarthScope's headed to Alaska next. We do have a plan for a spring 2014 interpretive workshop in Alaska, probably sometime close to the anniversary of the great earthquake, the 50th anniversary. Maybe we can dovetail with the SSA meeting. That's still sort of in preliminary plans, but we've had good connections with some of our collaborators like Ken Ridgway and Bob Butler are hopefully going to be, we're going to be working with them and planning that workshop. Other things, we're considering, this is not something that we have actually organized, but we're looking at the possibility of holding a great education outreach summit a year from this fall, ensuring EarthScope's broader impacts. And the idea is to bring together all of the PIs who are doing education outreach activities to coordinate their interests and to make sure that there is a lasting legacy even after the EarthScope program moves on to the next big thing or the next medium thing. We also will be holding a special interpretive workshop aimed primarily at media professionals, at science reporters and such, rather than museum and park professionals. Finally, I'd like to sort of challenge everybody to come and help us a little bit. Answer the questions, what education outreach programs could and should be next, not only for what we would do, but for what you would like to do and what you'd like to see as EarthScope moves into the final phase of its existence. And we have an education and outreach breakout session tomorrow afternoon. It was titled Using EarthScope in Undergraduate Education, but we've changed the focus a little bit. We're now calling it Shaping EarthScope's Next Broader Impacts. So that's tomorrow, 2:35 to 3:30 in room 305A. And everybody's invited. We'd like to hear what you have to say about education and outreach and where you'd like to see the EarthScope Education Outreach Program going in the future. So just to summarize, these are some of our thoughts from having been part of this enterprise for 2 years now. You can read these points. Essentially, we find, and I think everybody will agree, that because education outreach is foregrounded, that's an indispensable part of the EarthScope endeavor. It's what links us to the stakeholders who are paying the bills for all of this great research. As John Tabor pointed out this morning, that EarthScope Science and E&O, right from the start of the program, they've been close partners. EarthScope E&O in its myriad forms represents a legacy, not only to geoscience education, but also to public literacy in the earth sciences. And I'd like to again suggest that the lessons that we have learned and others have learned in education outreach activities should be involved in any planning that goes on, not only for the next big thing, but possibly the next medium things as well. I'd like to point out again that we are available to serve you. We welcome your inquiries at any time. You can get in touch with us through the EarthScope website, and all the members of the ESNO enterprise are here at this meeting, and we'd be happy to talk to you anytime. Thank you very much.